through. So if you have literally just joined us there, Michael, I'm going to be the host of today's session. So I'll be doing the talking and the demos. As I've mentioned, we've got Abby and Tina in the background who'll be on hand to answer your questions. So do keep them coming. Right, we're looking at emailing invoices though from Sage 50. So we're going to start with the very basics. So a little bit of background first of all, a little bit of an introduction to the topic. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run through a series of demonstrations. So I'll provide a little bit of information about setting Microsoft Outlook as the default email provider. We'll look at emailing an individual invoice. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. Emailing multiple invoices simultaneously, which can be a big time saver. So if you let them build up and then you want to send them out in a batch, you can do that. We'll have a look at taking a layouts only backup. So if you do amend your layout, so if you designed your own, it might not be something that you've actually done. So it's always a good precaution is to take that backup of layouts only, just in case anything happens to it. So you might amend it and make a mess of it. You can always restore that layouts only backup into the software. It means that your layouts are back where they were. We're then going to look at applying email settings to your layout. So we're going to look today at the settings and email defaults option. In part 2, which is the session we're running next week, we'll be looking at how you go about amending those email settings and applying them within the report designer. And then we're also going to look at the send immediately option. So if you are working with Outlook, which is what this session was advertised as being, then we'll look at that option that you've got as well. Just at the end, we'll explain more about the additional support that's available to you. And then obviously we'll open up to any questions if there's any outstanding at that point. So let's start with a little bit of background. Apologies for it's a little bit text heavy, this one, but just a quick introduction. So obviously your software, it does make it easy to email your documents. It's worth spending a little bit of time for that as well, because it means that it can be a very simple and quick task once you've done that, once you've set up and you've learned how to use that. It's not something that you're gonna have to amend your settings all of the time. You do it once. It's a bit like designing your invoice layout. You do it once and that's it done. Now you can, as I mentioned, and we'll see this in the demo today, you can send invoices individually or in bulk. And really that's just down to personal preference. There are several layouts in your software already which do contain default settings that will work straight away with Microsoft Outlook. And quite a few of them don't as well. And we're going to see the differences and how easy it is to apply email settings to those as well. And it is very easy to configure that, and that's what we're going to try and get across today. The report designer can be a little bit daunting, which is what we cover in part 2, but the email defaults option was introduced so that you can apply the basic settings to your layout, and that's very easy to do. So we'll be working through that in the session today. Now, although we've advertised this session for Outlook, because the vast majority of you will be using Outlook and integrating that with Sage accounts, but layouts can be configured even if you work with webmail, such as Gmail, for instance, and you would just use SMTP settings. And if you have a look in our help center, if you are using a webmail software, then you will find information on how you go about configuring those SMTP settings. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. So you'll see how to configure those settings for the information that's available. So you can just search for that one. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get stuck in with some demonstrations. So we'll probably run maybe about 20 minutes this demo, and then, as I say, we'll try and pick up some questions along the way as well. We'll hang around for those at the end. So let's start with the first one, and for those of you that are using Microsoft Outlook, it's making sure you've got that set as your default email provider. Now, it's easy to do that. The steps are covered in our help center. It's just a case of, and if you're using like a Windows 10, for instance, just in your search bar at the bottom, if you just search for or type in default apps, and it will bring up the screenshot that you can see on the screen there. And for email, just a case of you making sure that you've got Outlook set as that. Now, what we're looking at today is where you've got Outlook installed locally on your PC. That's the integration that we're looking at. If you're using the, say, the online version, as it were, then you would need to use SMTP settings. Excuse me. So do check that out. There is information in our help center should you need that. For the rest of the demos, what I'll quickly do is I'm going to share my screen at that point, and we'll run through some examples of emailing invoices. Now, as far as emailing invoices is concerned, particularly if you are working with Outlook, all you really need to do to start doing that is on your customers is to make sure that you've got email addresses entered. So if you go into a customer record, you'll see that, well, you're going to have some email boxes. And by default, it'll be email one that the invoices that are pre-configured. It's email one that it's going to use. You could potentially amend that, but it is going to be layout specific that. And some of you will just go up to email 3, so you'll just have the 3 boxes. I think it was version 28.2, so 28.2 or above, you should have the 6 email addresses. So just a case of popping them in there. Just make sure you've got that email address for your customers. Good idea as well is once you've entered that one, little tick box there, it doesn't really do anything, but you can use that as a filter if you want to. So to indicate that for this particular customer, you email your invoice out to them. When it's not ticked, see in the background there, there's an email or print column. Some will say email, some will say print. Just relates to this little checkbox that we've got here. But that's all you need to get started. If you think about compared to maybe printing it and posting it out, how long that takes and the cost involved and your time as well, email will be so much quicker. Right, okay, let's get started then. So we're going to pop into invoices. And as I mentioned, for emailing out invoices, you've really got 2 options. One is to do it from the invoice list where you've already got them created and saved. The other is when you're entering your invoice. So let's just pick on that very first customer. And I'll just use that product. Let's pop in 2 of those. Excuse me. And rather than just saving it at that point, what we've got is we've got the print option at the top. So if you want to email it from this screen when you're keying it in, you need to click print, select your layout. Now you might have yours flagged as a favorite. If you don't, just click your layouts folder on the side there. And then just a case of you finding which layout you want to use. Now, as I mentioned, some of them are designed already to be used for email. So they will generally say print or email. So it's the ones that normally say plain paper. And there's a few at the bottom as well, which will have email at the beginning. So we'll just use one of the standard ones. So let's pick on this one. So we just highlight that layout. You can flag it as a favorite if you want, just by clicking a little star. And then you would just either need to click the email icon on the end of this toolbar that follows you around, or you can click email at the top. So if I just click that, it tells me it's been successfully output to email. So I OK that one, and that's it done. Now when I close out of this screen, it'll prompt me, do you want to update the ledgers at this point? So I'll just, I'll OK that. I'll cancel out as well. And then I'm ready to start entering my next invoice. Now you'll see this one that's just been added to the end shows it's been posted because we chose to update the ledgers, and it's flagged as having been printed as well. And that's because we went through the print option when we're entering it. Now the other way that you can do that as well is to highlight it on the list. If I just do the one again at this stage, go back into print at the top. So it's very similar. There's the layout that I clicked on the little star to flag it as one of my favorites. So it means I'm not going into layouts and scrolling up and down that screen trying to find it. So I just select it. And again, output to email, little progress bar tells me it's been successfully output to email. OK that. And again, that would be it done. Now by default, if I just access my Outlook, Let's see if I can bring that up. What it does is when it generates an email by default, it will appear in the drafts folder. So that's where it's going to appear by default. And that means by default, it means that you've got the opportunity to come into the screen, into your drafts, to find the, I'll just bring that up again, bring it on the screen so you can see it. That would help. So it generates the email for you. It fills in a lot of the information for you already. So it's pulled through the customer's email address. It's got a subject line in there. So Email Demo Limited, which is the name of the company that I'm working in. And then it's got invoice number and then the number itself. And it's got the invoice attached as a PDF. And it's used that layout that we selected for the format. Now I can, by doing it in this way, it means that I can make whatever changes I want at that point. So for instance, I could choose my signature. I could pop in additional information. I could attach additional documents. I can make whatever changes I want. And then all I would need to do once I've done that, obviously just click send and off that goes. There was the other one there as well. I'll delete that duplicate one when I did that a second time. So nice and easy to do that then. And obviously that then appears in my sent items. Right, let's go back to Sage for a moment. Now, if I highlight this one here, so 107, 108, I'll not do 108, I'll do 109 and 110, just so we got three for three different customers. So let's say I want to email all these invoices out. Just click print, select the layout that I want to use. So again, we'll just stick with this one for the time being. And then I'll click email. Tells me it's been successfully output to email. So I just OK that. And again, if I go into my drafts folder, you can see I've got the three emails generated. So again, means I can go in, I can make amends and just click send at that point. So again, nice easy process. Let's just delete them from here for the time being. I don't want to get confused when we show additional demos in just a moment. Right, so that's how you go about emailing individually or in bulk. What we're going to look at now is, first of all, backing up our layouts. So if you've made changes or you just want to copy your layouts that you've got, or maybe you've designed your own, make sure you back up your layouts. So if you do make changes, take a new layout only backup. Now to do that, you just go to File and then into Backup. Be the same prompt that you would get if you were closing out the software. So just says closes all of the open windows and you'll lose any unsaved data. That's fine. Haven't got anything unsaved at this stage. Do you want to continue? So yes to that. And what I want to do for this one, ordinarily you're probably going to be backing up your data files only. But what we want to do is back up our layouts only at this stage. Now what I'll do is I'm going to pop mine on my desktop. So choose your location, give it a file name. I'll just call it Sage Layouts, and then I'll OK that. Now I do get a warning at this stage, and that's absolutely fine. Just says you've not included any data files as part of this backup. That's fine. If in the future, let's say I wanted to restore this backup, it would mean that I could restore the layouts without overriding the data. So that's absolutely fine. So I want to continue. So yes to that, let it run through. It tells me it's been successful. I just OK that. And if I pop onto my desktop, there's my Sage Layouts folder at that point. So that amended a layout in the future, maybe made a right mess of it, or maybe I've deleted a layout, and rather than having to go through that process and get that back and redesign it, I can just restore that layouts only backup and I'll be up and running again. It's often overlooked, that step. So make sure you've got a backup of your layouts only. Anyway, let's pop back to Sage. Now, what I'm going to do this time is I'll go back into invoices and credits, and I'll just highlight that first one on the list. We're going to go into print, and this time I'm going to choose a different layout. So let me just find one that we'll use. We'll use one without discount. So let's pick on this one. Now, this is a standard layout, and this just so happens this doesn't have email settings attached to it. So when I select that one and I try to email it, I'll get a prompt. No email settings were detected. Would you like to apply email settings at this stage? So Harun, you just mentioned that when you do this, this is what you get. So we're just about to run through this, so you'll see what the solution to your problem is. So if I click yes to that, it takes me into this email default screen. So this is what I would regard as still a fairly recent addition to the software, but it's been there a long time now. And you can access this in another way as well. The other way you can access that option, let's just cancel out of all of these windows, is to go into your settings menu and then choose email defaults, and it brings up the same window that I'm looking for. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to leave my email program set to Microsoft Outlook. Just bear with me there a second. Sorry about that. So we just want to leave the email program set to Microsoft Outlook. Obviously, if we were using webmail, we would select that, and it prompts you for loads of other settings at that point. But I'm going to leave mine set to Microsoft Outlook. We then got various tabs along the top for the types of document that we can apply email settings to. Now, some of you will have less options than I've got because I'm on the professional level, so it means I've got a sales order tab and also a purchase order tab. So if you're on Essentials, for instance, you're just going to have invoice, statement, and remittance. But we're going to choose invoice, and all of the tabs, as you flick through them, you'll see that the settings essentially, the look, it's the same options. So we're just going to apply email settings to one of our invoice layouts. Now, as you can see, we've got various options there. So these are the most common ones that you're most likely to want to amend. So we got the two option. So when we click that, you can see by default, it's looking at the customer record email 1. So if you specifically wanted to use a layout that picked out email address 2 instead, then you could switch that over. Now, if you want to send it to multiple email addresses, which is quite common, that's something that we're going to be picking up in next week's session when we look at the report designer side and amending the email settings at that point. But we're going to leave that set to customer record email 1. You do have other options as well. So you could just manually enter an email address, but let's face it, for each customer, they're going to have a different email address. You don't want to have to key that in and have a specific one for each layout. So you want it to pick that email address up from the customer's record. Your CC, so if you want to send a copy to an email address, this is something that you might think, well, actually, I want to send, when I email out an invoice, what I want to do is, maybe I want to send a copy of it to email address 2. Or you might even have your own mailbox that you want to send a copy of the email that's gone out that you want to send that to. So not just necessarily storing them in your sent items. You might want to pop in a manually entered address. So it's a fixed address then. But we'll just leave it set to none. Your subject line. So in this case, it's going to say invoice. It's going to have the text invoice. It'll pull through the number, just as an example, and it'll say from, and then in this case, it's going to pull through my company name. There's a couple of various options on there as well. You might even just want to enter a manual subject on there. You might not want it to pull through things like the date or the actual invoice number itself. So you can manually enter an option on there as well if you want to. But we'll just accept the default. We come on to the attachment settings. Now, by default, when you output an invoice or output the email, the invoice is going to be attached to the actual email, and the attachment will be in PDF format, and that's by far the most common. It's probably what you'd expect these days. There are other formats available, but I think you would expect to receive it in PDF format when you're receiving or even when you're sending. That's what you would expect to see. Now, rather than that, what you can do if you prefer is you got a little tick box here to send the information in the body of the email. So if you want to see a copy of the actual invoice detail in the body of the email rather than as an attachment, then you can tick that box instead. If you do that, it will grey these options out, but for the vast majority of instances, you'll attach it as a PDF. The file name you can choose. So by default, it's going to say invoice and it'll pull through the number automatically. And then you can choose to include a password if you want. Now, by default, the PDF would have a password attached to it. The password that would attach is something that you can set within the customer's record itself. So if you think, right, well, actually, it's just going to a mailbox that the customer has, and more than one people have access to that mailbox, and it might be sensitive information, then you could set up. It'll be up to the customer to give you a password that needs to be used. So essentially, you can specify that in the customer record. I don't think it's massively used, that one. Final two options, just override default Outlook signature. It's going to be set to no by default. And this option here, send options. Now by default, a bit like the other one, if we leave that set to save to mailbox, which I'll do for the time being, it means that when I output that email, it's going to, again, it'll save it to Outlook in my drafts folder. We'll come back to that send immediately in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to click apply at this stage. Now remember, if you are on version 29, you've got the help option in the top right-hand corner. So if you want more information about the information that's on your screen, wherever you are within the software, you can just click on that help link. I'm going to click apply though at this stage. And then it's going to ask me, right, which layouts do you want to apply that to? So actually, I'm just going to choose the one. Now, don't be tempted to tick the box. You can do that, and it means that when I click OK, it's going to essentially edit this layout, apply all those settings, and save it. It'll go on to the next one, save it. So that could take some time to run through. So what I'm going to do is find the one I'm after, which I think was, we'll try that one, A4 invoice credit unit price without discount. I'll just select that one only, and then I'll OK that. And that's it done. Obviously, if I'd selected more than one layout, that progress bar is going to take a little while to run through. And this is where, again, you've got the same sort of options for the other types of documents that you can output. So we'll just OK that, that'll close out. Now, what that means is if I just select this one this time, ABS Garages, I'll go into print, I'll find that layout. So which one was it? It was a one without discount. It should be that one. So we'll select that layout, output to email. It tells me this time that the report has successfully output to email. So Harun, that's your answer to yours. Your layout you were selecting didn't have that. So you just need to go through essentially those steps that we just looked at. Now it tells us it has been successfully output. So we click OK. And if we go back into Outlook, into the drafts, and there it is there. This is the one that we've just generated. Now that again gives me the opportunity to amend the settings, the text, etc., and then I can click send. Now, once you gain a bit more a bit more confidence with the email option, what you might find is that what you want to do with your layout is, or your emails, is just send them automatically. You don't want to make any changes. You want to make that process as slick as possible. And that's where the send immediately comes in. So what we'll do is we'll go back into settings, email defaults, back into invoice. And the only thing I'm going to change is this option at the bottom. I'm going to leave all of the other settings as they were. And I want to say, right, send immediately. Click apply. Browse for that layout again. So it was the first one that said without discount. So make sure I tick it. Click OK. Little progress bar. Just OK. And that's it done. Now, if I select this one for this Bob's Building Supplies, we'll go into print, into layouts, find the one that was without discount, first one. Actually, I'll flag it as a favorite in case you save me keep having to select browse the list each time. So we'll say without discount, output to email. It tells me the report has successfully output to email. I OK that. And if I switch back to my Outlook, and there's nothing in the drafts folder this time. Instead, it's gone straight into my sent items. So that's really good. Imagine if you're sending a batch of 50, you want to email out 50 invoices all to different customers. It'll generate 50 emails and it'll just send them automatically. So you do have that choice when you're working with Outlook. If you're working with a webmail software, you'll find that you don't have that choice. It will just send them automatically once you've integrated. But with Outlook, you do have that choice either to save them to your mailbox so that you can amend them, then click send, or you can have them so they send immediately. So that's your introduction to emailing out your invoices. Now, once you've done that, you do have an additional option. And it's this option here, this email option. Now, what this will do is, the idea is, rather than me highlighting my invoice and then going into print, finding the layout, selecting it, and then clicking email, clicking OK to that, and then closing out. The idea of this option, what it will do is, I'll highlight it, I'll click email, and it tells me it's been successfully output. Now, the first time you use either email or the quick print, it will ask you which layout you want to set as your default. So it's a lot quicker once you've done that. So anyway, that's your introduction at this stage to emailing out your invoices. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back to the slides for a moment. So keep your questions coming. Do remember, we might just say come along to session 2, which is, I think it's at the same time next week. No, actually, it's on Wednesday, my mistake there. It's on Wednesday afternoon next week, part 2. So if you are wanting to come along to that one, do get yourself registered. The link will be included on your follow-up email. Now, if you weren't quite with us when we started the session and you've got any questions, all you need to do to submit those is click your little link on your toolbar. It's a little icon that looks like the speech bubble with a question mark. Give it a click, and then you'll get access to the box in the bottom right-hand corner. Pop in your question or your comment, click send. It'll appear on our screens, and we'll try and answer that for you. To give you an idea of some of the sessions that we do have coming up, obviously we're celebrating International Accounting Day, which is actually tomorrow, but we'll be running a whole week of webinars this week. Final one tomorrow will be our quiz, which will be to enable you to test your knowledge on the areas that we've covered this week. So if you're wanting to come along, that's at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Emailing invoices, sorry, it is on Thursday next week. So same time as this week, but Thursday next week. So that will obviously allow us to explore the email settings that you can specify within the Sage Report Designer. So if you want to use multiple email addresses or have a much more complex subject line, for instance, you can do that, and we'll show you how to do that in part 2. Loads of other sessions, links are included on your follow-up email. So keep your questions coming. I think we're just about on top of most of them. Zena, you mentioned there, can you send multiple invoices to one customer? So by default, yes is the answer to that one. So it will attach the invoices. So I'll quickly demonstrate this one. So I've got a few set up for this A1 design services. So we'll highlight those 3. If I go into print and I choose the standard layout and I output that to email, it tells me the report has been successfully output. So I OK that one. If I go back to my Outlook, and it's in, nearly forgot there, it's in the drafts folder for that specific layout. So if I just open that one, then you'll see all 3 invoices have been attached. Now, some people will want that to be split, and they'd rather 3 separate emails go. Well, and again, that is possible, but it's something that we will show you how to do if you're in that position and you're wanting to split them. So generating a separate email for each invoice. We're going to show you that in our emailing invoices part 2. So we'll cover that one in a bit more detail next week. So yes, you can do that one, Tina. Zena, I should say. Obviously, you don't want to bombard your customer with loads and loads of emails, particularly if you've got, they might have, however, if there's a batch of invoices that you've entered. Any additional questions at all? If you do think of any, remember, you've got access to our help centre, so sage.co.uk/help. It'll ask you to choose your product, so Sage 50 accounts, and then loads of information in there on using your software. And there's loads around emailing and setting up the settings and sending them out, etc. So if you do think of anything, do try that. Beyond that, remember our support team is on hand. Right, I think we'll end the webinar just at that point then. So many thanks for coming along. I hope you found it useful, giving you some food for thought. Easy enough to set up, obviously easy enough to amend those settings. So do try it. If anyone needs a bit of a recap on what we covered today, remember your follow-up email. It'll be with you within the next hour or so. It's got your links on so that you can register for other webinars and watch recordings, and there will be a copy of this session as well. That will be attached to the email. So if you need a bit of a recap on what we've covered, that will be on there. Linda, you mentioned about sending remittances. So there is already a recording on the remittances area as well, so that might interest you. So again, do check that out. If anyone's got any feedback for us, any thoughts, ideas they'd like to share with us, there is a little survey pop-up as you leave today's session. If you can take a minute to complete that, it'd be greatly appreciated. We love reading those comments just to see if we've hit the mark or not. So we'll end the webinar at that point. Once again, many thanks for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you on some other sessions soon. Many thanks.